I haven't been a person who was super clear about what, they want to do in life. I have a vague idea of what I want to do. I have a very clear idea of what I don't want to do. I sort of followed the signals and somehow the path got laid as I walked on it.
A workplace myth you once believed but you no longer do.
That someone else will pave way for your growth path. A manager, an organization can enable it, but path for your growth has to come from you and come from within. And you need to know who you are and what you would like to do. It just has to be self-directed.
I love this point about you have to put it on the table. How have you done this? Is it conversations with manager? Do you wait for the, let's say, review cycle?
If you feel like you are not finding enough meaning in your work, you speak to whatever the system provides you in terms of opportunities. And I don't think it makes sense to wait for an appraisal discussion for that. I mean, you have to A-proof, but you have to also start saying that, okay, yeah, I'm maxing out. This is what I want to learn. It happens over a period of time and not a point in time.
Today, my guest is Apoorva Maheshwari, the head of marketing at Bestseller India, the company behind brands we love like Jack & Jones, Vero Moda, Only, and Selected Homme. Over 15 years, Apoorva has built a stellar marketing career across Procter Gamble, Accor, and Zivame by delivering some category-defining campaigns with a strong focus on marketing fundamentals. I'm always energized by Apoorva's unique take on life, and today I'm super excited to dive into how she's built her career by following her curiosity, leaning into her strengths, taking smart risks, and tapping into the strength of relationships. We're all told we should do this. Well, Apoorva's actually done it, and she shares how you can too. This episode is for anyone who's trying to figure out what they're actually good at and how to turn that into a career advantage. In the Career Clinic, Apoorva shares practical tips to your career queries on how to overcome self-doubt, to speak up in meetings, the most underrated skill early in your career, how to handle unrealistic goals, and how to build your network outside of your manager, and so much more. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to subscribe and follow the Career Starter Kit wherever you get your podcasts or YouTube. This way, you don't miss an episode and it really supports the podcast. And with that, I bring you Apoorva Maheshwari.
Apoorva is someone who always brings a ray of sunshine. I always feel more sorted after having a word with her. So that's what I'm hoping that is going to come out of the chat today as well and will be helpful for all the young professionals out there.
Thank you, Anna. That's so nice to hear. And also a heart, the Gen Z heart on the ray of sunshine bit.
You have had a fascinating, amazing career over the last 15 or so years. But for today, because our audience is young professionals, let's start back at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about what you studied, what did you early in your career, how did you...
So, I studied economics. What fascinated me was really how brands were built, right? I was that child who would watch television for the ad breaks. That person who will see every hoarding and try and understand how and who are these people who put this thing together, right? And a master's in finance or a master's in economic policy wasn't the way for it. And I come from a business family. I come from a Marwadi business family. Very early on in life, I realized that I want to pursue a career in marketing. I want to build brands and I want to build consumer businesses or businesses that are built through market. 3 years of economics, then realized that I want to study marketing. So I prepared for my GMAT, got into MICA. I did my master's in marketing with a major in brand management and market research. And yeah, 15 years and here I am, still as excited as I was, I think, when I got into my business school for putting great campaigns, building solid brands, making sure that consumers know these brands and these businesses through fascinating, fantastic products that deliver and through campaigns that are memorable.
For me, what's super interesting is that you mentioned that you had that awareness that you want to build brands where the consumer love kind of grows the brand. I'm curious if you always had that awareness. Did you arrive on it? Was there a path to getting there? Was it intuitive? And the reason I ask is because sometimes there's a lot of noise on what you should do. So I'm wondering if this is something you had to almost protect and have that conviction.
I haven't been a person who was super clear about what, they want to do in life. I was somebody and I am somebody who's directional in nature. I have a vague idea of what I want to do. I have a very clear idea of what I don't want to do. I studied in one of the best colleges in the country. I was at SRCC amongst fantastic peers and friends who had a very defined, okay, now we're going to do either MSc in economics or we're going to do an MFA in finance or we're going to go study and do study business with a finance major or investment major, etc., etc. I was just very clear that that's not something that's speaking to me. I told you, I would watch television, I would watch matches, I saw all of that and I would see ad breaks, right? I till today, if you make me sit, I will sing out all the jingles of all the iconic ads. I will tell you scene by scene what's happening. And there was one instance, and I remember we got some product from, I think it was one of the HUL brands, and the product did not deliver. And this was long back, right? So, but I think the ASM for that brand came to our house. They tried and understand why, what was the issue with the product. They got the replacement. And I was really fascinated. And brand building comes to its purest form in CPG industry. And I was really fascinated by, I see this logo, I see this product, I see it on the shelf. And this is the inner working of that business, right? And then from that, and then HUL, I remember, came to campus, and that was the only marketing role that HUL came to campus, and I was amongst very few students who applied for it. I didn't make it for their MT program, but I went through the process, and I was like, and these were some of the signals. I didn't have that much awareness at that point in time on what it takes to build a marketing career. I think we have a lot more information now. Students are very clear. I mean, my daughter knows exactly which school she wants to go to, etc., etc., and she's all of 9. But I sort of followed the signals, and somehow the path got laid as I walked on it.
I love that because you started by saying two things, right? One is you were clear on what you don't want to do, and that itself gave you clarity. And the second is you followed your joy, right? Like we say it and it sounds nice, but you are actually able to explain what that feels like in practice, right? Like if you enjoy watching ads, that's a signal. If you have an interaction and that opens your eyes in some way, that's a signal. So these are all the signals to listen to along the way.
I think also now we're on, and people now or students now would probably be in a situation where they have a lot more access to information. So they probably don't need these signs as much. But yeah, back in the day, it was the signs.
No, I think signs are valuable. So, cut to you did start in CPG your career, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your first initial years and looking back now, what did you do well? What would you differently? Or what you wish you knew back then?
I was genuinely, and I was really lucky that I got an opportunity to start my professional career in the industry of my choice and in an organization like P&G. Now that I look back and, I've been in multiple industries and multiple companies, and the kind of work that we were doing 15 years ago, kind of quality of, and the impetus on brand building and the investment, whether it was people, whether it was, marketing itself, the kind of impetus that the company put was fantastic. So there was just so much to learn. It was really like being in the best possible environment to learn brand building. In terms of what I would do differently now, I don't think I would do anything differently now versus what I was doing back then. Learning and arriving at who you are is a journey, and you have to sort of do the journey at the start of, and obviously because the environment is such that, and especially at Procter, the environment was such that there was a lot of obviously rigor in decision making, right? And there was a lot of analysis, whether you were in the core brand management function, whether you were in MSNP, whether you were in ER, whether you were in the whole brand building organization. But there was a lot of rigor on analysis and arriving at decisions on the basis of obviously data. And that's something that I earned and learned very early on in life, and that did not come naturally to me. I am a person with a bit of a creative flair. I flourish around people and I'm able to work with people who have creative flair, but exercising that left side of the brain is something that I really truly learned very early on at Procter.
I love the awareness of like saying this is the way the business was happening and this is where my strengths were. How did you follow that? signal?
So I realized, and I again realized because I was working on multiple categories. I worked in beauty, I worked in grooming, and I worked both at the EPP or entry price point, beauty and grooming brands, as well as premium products and propositions, and worked on launches across. And I realized that I truly enjoy categories and businesses where brands had a play, right? And brand building and categories where you can command a price premium on the basis of obviously product or service efficacy, and then having the ability to price up because of the just the sheer strength of the brand that it is. And that typically manifested in lifestyle brands, typically manifested in premium slash luxury brands. And yeah, that was something that I learned early on, and then all the subsequent decisions were sort of aligned to, irrespective of which business or category, but typically places where lifestyle or premiumness had a play and brands had a play.
I think it makes complete sense, which is what you're saying is there's a breadth of experience early on, and from that you're able to kind of get a sense what speaks to you, what aligns with your strengths, and then your subsequent choices you align with that.
Yeah, you must try out things, right? And you will realize that unless and until you're not a fish trying to climb a wall, you wouldn't realize that you're meant to swim.
I agree. Okay, now I know Procter famously hires from campus, so you go from student to corporate professional on a dime, right? How was that adjustment for you? What was that experience like?
It puts you immediately from get-go in a very multicultural environment, right? Because our regional teams, our global teams, and obviously the India team also, right? So we will all sort of work together. And then for a majority part of my career, I've been in multicultural environments. I think anybody who graduates must learn the basics of professionalism, right? What's the correct way to communicate, for example? Back in the day, our mode of communication would primarily be email. Now we communicate with our colleagues across everything, right? We communicate over voice, over emails, over SMS, over Slack, you name it, right? But basic communication etiquette is something that everybody should be mindful of, right? The way you carry yourself in meetings, making sure that you have sensitivity and are aware and conduct yourself well in multicultural environments, right? It's just an unset protocol, cultural protocol, and I think you should and you must have that flexibility. At the same time, you will be working obviously within your own business or your organizational context. Should be working with multiple people from multiple departments, so just having that flexibility to be able to work with different sets of people coming from different walks of life and different cultural lens is something that you must learn rapidly.
So, I know all of us have a learning curve. Was there a moment that you felt out of depth? How did you handle it? How did that learning experience kind of share you? What were your early learning experiences? How did they shape you?
Every time I have moved a job, whether it was because of going further in my career or whether because it necessitated on the family front, every time I moved serendipitously, I was in a different industry. It was never planned, it was never thought from that perspective, but I just landed up in a different industry that I'd never worked in. I worked in CPG, I've worked in real estate, I've worked in hospitality, I've worked in e-commerce. I'm now working in retail, and obviously the nuance of the business, because obviously they're different industries altogether, right? The nuance of the business changes, the context changes, and then you feel out of depth because you're looking at business KPIs, which are, a hotel industry would look at a different set of KPIs, whereas retail will look at different set of KPIs, and you, because of the unfamiliar nature of the industry, you feel out of depth, and I think it's natural. But the way I've handled it is, to me, what's really familiar is marketing. What's really familiar is the way brand building, marketing, the fundamentals there don't change. And then what I try to do is I try to rapidly understand how marketing influences the business, how it helps it grow, and how can marketing contribute uniquely to the business strategy of the business, right? Like what is it that the business is valuing? How can marketing uniquely contribute to it? And then start working towards that, right? And channel the team's effort.
Love it. So, for you, the anchor is the kind of brand fundamentals that still hold true, and figuring out the connection from marketing, your function, to the business.
Exactly. And also then to quickly understand and quickly comes because then you spend that kind of time, right? You spend that time in the market, you spend that time with the partners to understand the nuts and bolts of that particular industry. So that work is important.
Tactically speaking, how do you understand the connection between marketing and the business? Like, is it going through financial reports? Is it going out in the market, like you said? Is it something else? Like, what are the two, three things that you do to understand that connection?
I think understanding the business performance, what are the various segments that are contributing to the business, what are the issues that are ailing different businesses, and from there, how can marketing help? That's one, which is purely the business performance. The second thing that you should look at, obviously hit the market. I can't stress this enough. Being in the market, seeing your business from the context of consumption, from the context of consumer, and from the context of partner as well as competition is so critical. And all businesses, and especially all your actually any business whatsoever, right? At the end of the day is being consumed. Spending that time in the market gives you that a understanding of the business and also gives you that motivation or that meaning in your job. So that I think is something that anybody must do. And the third thing is really observe your competition like a hawk. You don't just understand your business, you also understand what's the key competition, and then what are they doing well, and where there is opportunity for your business. And the fourth is really read up, right? Read up on the industry, read up on the macroeconomic environment. That I think helps in quickening the process of learning.
I think that 4 points are a very actionable list. And so I want to ask you is that as you work through this, right? Because obviously there's a learning phase as you enter a new industry, as you ramp up. What is the one thing that you've learned that kind of helps you get through this phase and even have the confidence, right, that you are going to get through it?
The belief that sure enough this is feeling alien, sure enough I'm feeling out of depth. I have that belief, and it comes from doing it over and over again. If I put my head to it, I'll figure it out.
I want to go back to some of the observations about your experience, right? You started out at PNG, you started out in brand communications, and after a few years, you moved into marketing. How did you know that this was the right move for you? How did you go about it?
I think one is to be guided by your curiosity, right? And I am that person. If I want to learn something, then I'll find a way to learn it. And I'm also, I think initially I was not as self aware, but now I'm also quite self aware. I'm able to see where a certain industry is going or a certain function is going, and where my strengths are at and where my knowledge gaps are, and whether those gaps can be filled by either projects or by roles or by just upskilling in general. Once you have that awareness, and then you either speak to your manager, you have a conversation within the organization, or then you have a conversation outside the organization. You have to max out what you can do in a particular role, and that maxing out has to be done by you. And then the conversation of, okay, I have done this, I have contributed meaningfully, and I am ready to learn more, is again something that you have to put on the table, right? It's a two-way street.
I love this point about you have to put it on the table. How have you done this? Is it in conversations with managers? Do you wait for the, let's say, review cycle? I'm just curious because in my personal journey, I've not always had the confidence to raise my hand, right? So I'm curious, any thoughts there for, yeah.
And I echo with that, right? I've done a lot of self selection and doubted myself a lot at the start of my career. I think it's normal and human, and I think it's a bit of a hallmark for women. But you have to speak up for yourself, right? Because it's not fun to live in frustration. And if you feel like you are not finding enough meaning in your work, you speak to your managers, you speak to whatever the system provides you in terms of opportunities. And I don't think it makes sense to wait for an appraisal discussion for that. I mean, you have to approve, but you have to also start saying that, okay, hey, I'm maxing out. This is what I want to learn. It happens over a period of time and not a point in time.
The other experience that I'm very curious you had early in your career was Zivame, right? It, I guess, was a fairly young startup when you joined, and I think you also were fairly early in your career when you joined it. So I'm curious, what did you learn in a startup versus a more established company like PNG where you started, and how did that experience kind of shape you?
I love Zivame. I enjoyed. I did not spend a lot of time there, but I really enjoyed the category, the business, the teams. So it was a beautiful stint. And also at that point in time, I had just about returned from my maternity break. So I was mom to a 7-month baby at that point in time. In terms of what I learned and how it shaped me was that I truly understood the meaning of speed and dynamism in an organization, because there was just, I think the business was also trying to figure out its place in the sun. And that meant all departments, whether it was tech or whether it was supply chain or whether it was product or then whether it was marketing, right? The business was pivoting, and then how do you pivot and meaningfully contribute and make sure that the pivot is successful? So that's one. You wouldn't have plans which are laid out in 3 to 5 year wala timeline. There will be plans which will be laid out in 1 month, 3 months, and 12 months wala framework. And I think it made me less angsty towards change, right? It made me less uncomfortable in change, because there are some people who like, things laid out, and that sense of control puts them at ease. And sometimes you don't have that. And then how do you make sure that you're riding the wave, so as to speak of? That's something that I learned at a very esoteric level. That's what I learned.
Sounds very valuable. There's one point that you mentioned in passing that I'm very curious about, right? You mentioned that you joined Zivame back from maternity leave with a 7-month old. Now, for a lot of folk, one, I think in general, maternity is like a how do you navigate this in your career? And joining a startup post maternity isn't something a lot of people would take up, right? So I'm just curious, like, what within you said, I will still do it, I will still raise my hand for this opportunity. And second, how did you make it work?
One is the organization itself, right? Whether it was Richa or Shaleen or Sirisha at that point in time, who knew that I'm coming in, and that I wouldn't be that person who can stay on till 9 or 10 in the night. I will have to leave by a certain time, but if need be, I am there. And having that trust and faith in me was something that is from the org's perspective. I am still in touch with a lot of folks from Zivame at that point in time, and they all understood my stage of life. And there would be times, right, because Adita's daycare was right across the street, so I'd bring my baby to the office, and people know me from that time, like that I have this adorable child with me. The second is my village at home really came through, right? Like whether it was my husband's, whether it was my mum or my mum-in-law, everybody. And we were in Bangalore at that time, so they traveled, or I mean, Ruchi was there only, but I had support at home. They realized that I'm joining a business which is not your traditional setup, but you have to put it out there that this is what I'm doing, and then everybody who wants to make it work for you will just help you make it work. You have to send that signal to the universe.
On that note, we're going to move on to our second segment, which is called the Career Clinic. So, as we've been preparing this podcast and newsletter, I've been talking to different young professionals who are, like, let's say in the first 5 years of their experience, and there's some questions that keep coming up as recurring themes. So what we're going to do in the Career Clinic is I'm going to share with you some questions of typical situations that young professionals are trying to navigate, are trying to figure out. And we would love to hear how you would have navigated it if you faced something similar, or how you kind of would recommend somebody to think about it. So I'm going to get into the first situation, right? This is a young professional who's figuring out how to do goal setting. Now, goal setting is obviously something that's very new when you're in a company, because you don't really do that as a student. So this person says that our goal is to deliver as much reach through our marketing plans as last year, but we have only 75% of the budget we had. So I don't think this is possible, but I'm hesitant to push back on unrealistic goals. I don't want to be judged for not being ambitious enough. How do I judge what's a good level of stretch to sign up for, and how do I push back on unrealistic goals?
Okay, pushing back on the unrealistic goals is easier because a lot of times it's mathematical. But my suggestion would really be to sign up for the stretch, at least at the start of your career, right? Being realistic on what can be done and what can't be done is learned over a period of time. But at the start of your career, I think you should roll up your sleeves. You should sign up saying that, okay, if this is a constraint, I will try and make do make the best out of this constraint, right? I mean, if I were at the start of my career, I still wouldn't shy away from taking too much on my platter. I did that at the start of my career also, and I wouldn't shy away from it.
So the second question is about manager. Again, this is like a whole new creature, right, in your life when you join and you start working. So this person's talking about actually how do you think about expanding your network beyond your manager. So what she's saying is, I'd like to have an equation with my skip level manager, but I'm afraid that my manager won't like it. Even when I try to give my skip level an update, she asked me if I've spoken to my manager on this. So how do I build a relationship with my skip level manager?
Working relationship from the lens of it being a skip level relationship with an ulterior motive, that's stuff that will probably make your manager, I think, a bit angsty. But Anna, you'd be surprised by how far a good question or a common interest can take anybody. Purely relationship building or network building, right? If you approach anybody from the lens of curiosity or learning from them, I found people to be very welcoming of, and that hierarchy sort of melts, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all people.
And we're all trying to solve a problem, so curiosity first.
Yeah. And common interest, right? Like, I mean, if you're if people are equally passionate, say for example about travel, right, you can exchange notes. I mean, not everything has to be thought from a business or work context.
Makes sense. Okay. Our next question is again about one of these things which is new in your life, which is meetings, right? So this person shares, I feel too nervous to speak up in meetings. I can relate to that, especially when I disagree with something. I know I should, but I'm just not able to. What if my idea is not good enough, or what if my point's not valid? This is kind of what they're feeling.
I also sort of hard relate to this, and my suggestion is this, and this is what I have done and learned the hard way, is you shouldn't self-select yourself and your point of view out, right? I would hold back my questions, I would hold back my point of view, and I would hold back my dissent also, because I just thought that it was not important or of value at the start of my career, for sure, right? But I think over the years I've learned I have a unique way of seeing things, right? Whether it's data or whether it's business problems or whether it's consumer problems or whatever it is, right? My brain can sort of crisscross and problem solve quite rapidly. And that confidence has made sure that I put my point of view across. What I do try to do is I keep the emotion part of it in check. So I try to make my either it's dissent or whether it is point of view or whether it is suggestion, whatever it is, I mean it's succinct, so that's one. It's not coming from a place of emotion all, most of the time. And honestly don't want to have that regret where I feel like I should have said something and I didn't. The worst is that people will judge me for my questions, but really who cares?
I love it. So I can share something on this because this is something I've faced and had to learn my way through. For me, very tactically, one of the thing works is having two or three stock phrases. Because sometimes, you don't know how to enter, you don't want to be emotional, you don't want to disagree. So things like, have you considered, but the way I see it. Like I have two, three stock phrases that kind of give me an in. And then, once you're talking, then it becomes a conversation. But tactically, this works for me.
I also, and I see a lot of women trying to sort of lean on to these phrases to soften their point of view or, not come across as somebody who's confrontational. I go in with it.
I love it. Noted. On that note, we head into the third and final segment of this podcast. So, this is what we call fast track. This is a rapid fire round where I'm going to ask you some tips, some hacks, some like just learnings or best practices that you've picked up along the way, and you can share whatever's top of mind and whatever works for you.
मुझे कॉफी हैम्पर मिलेगा इसके बाद.
Yeah, I think we'll have to work on that point.
Had to bring this across.
I know the shadow of Karan Johar is always present, right?
The OG podcast of India.
So let's get into fast track. I'm going to give you situations and you tell me what works for you. The one thing that unlocked growth for you.
Finding my flow state. And again, it comes from that same thing where, you have to fall and then you have to learn what you're good at. And once you know what you're good at and the stuff that needs to be done, but you may not necessarily be great at it, but making sure that it doesn't it isn't so obstructive, and finding that flow state is it's such a virtuous circle, and I really wish people find themselves in that.
Good, solid advice. The most underrated skill early in your career.
Being easy to work with, I think being a genuinely nice person, being a reliant, being a trustworthy person, making sure that your word has weight, these I think are underrated early skills.
A workplace myth you once believed, but you no longer do.
That someone else will pave way for your growth path. A manager, an organization can enable it, but the path for your growth has to come from you and come from within. And you need to know who you are and what you would like to do, and it just has to be self-directed. I mean, great organizations and great managers will enable it, and they will sometimes see what you possibly can't see and push you towards it. And I'm lucky that I've had those people, right? I'm lucky that people have come my way in terms of managers, in terms of skip managers, in terms of company heads, etc., who've seen that potential in me or who've had that confidence to punt on me. And I hope that people find such people in their careers. But there's a lot of self-awareness that you need to know that this works for me, this doesn't work for me.
Got it. And on that note, you mentioned it, having people like that who say your name when you're not in the room, right? What's your number one networking tip?
I think making sure that your thought, your action, and your words align, they are in full alignment, and that the world knows you for that, right? Like your organization or people around you know you for that. If you are true and authentic, and then people see you for it, that's something that I'm not very great at networking, but just being known for what I do is something that that I think might enable it. And the other thing is, just don't approach people from a place of interest all the time, because that's a very short-lived conversation. I think have genuine interest in people. That would probably be my networking tip.
I love it because your networking tip is more about like just be good, right? It's more reputation. Like if your reputation is solid, the network will come.
Oh yeah, reputation is the word for it. I think yes, yes.
What is a soft skill that's more valuable than people think?
Understand the language of the business, right? What is the prevalent language which works across organization? Typically, it's your revenue, it's your EBIT, in terms of your margins, it's attrition. That's the language of the business. Then different people and different departments have different languages, and then what different department perspective or people perspective is, and what you bring as a functional leader slash person, making sure that you're bringing the two together is good soft skill. And just be soft spoken and be nice as a person.
I think this goes back to the point earlier, right? Which is be sensitive to it and adapt, and that actually helps. Let's talk about meeting. One thing you should always prepare before a meeting.
You should ideally send out pre-read. You should have an agenda so that people know what to expect out of that meeting. Don't have long meetings. It just doesn't work. And at your end, you should have a checklist of what is the outcome from the meeting, right? Are you seeking actions? Are you seeking alignment? Are you trying to bring in differing perspective from different functions on the table? Whatever it is, but have the outcome in your head defined, and then make sure that you're steering the meeting to that outcome.
Solid advice. A mistake most young professionals make.
I say people being fractional in their presence now. Obviously, the distraction, which is the device, but it's just fractional presence and fractional attendance and attention. And I find it really juvenile to be half present in anything, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a conversation, whether it's an interaction. You should. I mean, if you've committed your time to somebody, then you should bring your full attention to that conversation.
I think this is something for all of us, young professionals, senior professionals, everyone.
Anna, sometimes it's so easy to just, like, the device is so easy to sort of keep aside and remove that distraction. But as you grow, then there's obviously noise in the mind, and making sure that you sort of put it at the back and bring whatever it is
You're
that you can bring,
present.
right? Whether it's experience or whether it is suggestions or whether it is dissent to a conversation, but be present.
One piece of advice to someone starting out today.
I think show up, own your words, own your actions, And if you've said that you will do something, then do it. Or have a very good reason as to why you couldn't do it.
One book or blog that you've enjoyed reading or everyone should read?
There's this one book that I go back to again and again in life. It's called The Poetry Pharmacy, and there are a couple of volume/versions of it. There's so much life outside of work, right? I think you should cultivate a rich inner world. You should have a rich life outside of work. You should be interested in, human pursuits. There's so much art, there's so much music, there's so much cinema, literature, there's policy, there's architecture, there's so much beauty in this world. And there's obviously relationships to cultivate outside of work, right? Make that inner world rich, make your relationships rich, and by default you'll become a softer, more interesting person, and you'll be able to bring so much of that into your work to make sure that work improves.
So, on that note, thank you so much, Apoorva. This conversation was funny, this conversation was candid. I've picked up so many things. Any last thoughts as you kind of look back at your younger self or folks starting out today?
You should be intentional with your work, right? There's so much chatter about, and there's, people are not being, and I understand the reason why, but your work will have just as much meaning as you put into it. So you should be intentional about your work. You should take pride in what you do, and you should strive for that.
I love it. On that note, thank you so much. This was a lovely conversation. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Anna. I enjoyed this so much.